Welcome to Killer Portfolio or Portfolio Killer. My name is Allison, and I want to see you guys get excited. This is going to be an awesome day, so let's make some noise for this. All right? I think so too. I didn't hear that. I need a little more. Come on, a little more. Okay, so there's a couple of comments. A, please turn off your phones. Any question you guys want to ask, please ask. So when I'll give you a signal to start lining up, and we will answer all the questions. The other thing, after the panel, we go to the room for the portfolio review, and we take great pride in this, but we see every single student. So I know the line gets really long, but we will see all of you. Okay. All right. So I think we should do some introductions. Moby?
Yes. Guys, my name is Moby Franke. I graduated ironically, from the Academy of Art here in San Francisco. I was a illustrator, fine art major. I had no aspirations of getting into video games at the time. That was something that I was more into, the fine art and illustration aspect. I wanted to get into Pixar at one point. That didn't happen. It's okay. I luckily happened along, had a friend from art school that got me into Valve, ironically. That was my first real job in the industry. I didn't take that for granted. I was there for 11 years, and now I work at Riot Games, and it's a fantastic job. That's all I can say.
Any of you guys ever played Team Fort 2? Anybody? Yeah.
I was the art director on that.
Yeah, it's the little game that didn't do much for the industry at all.
I didn't know it at the time.
My name is Greg Furch. I was the art director on XCOM Enemy Unknown, XCOM 2. Spent 22 years at Firaxis Games. I'm newly independent at a unannounced game studio with an unannounced title. So, yes. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Claire.
My name's Claire Hummel. I've been a concept artist and art director in the industry for a little over 10 years now. My first job in the industry was technically at Neopets, where I worked as an artist for 7 summers. And since then I've worked at Microsoft Games. I worked on BioShock Infinite, designed the Lutece twins. I worked at HBO doing a Westworld VR project, and now I'm with the Campo Santo team, who is now at Valve. Woo. So that's where I'm at. Yeah.
So I'm Gavin Goulden. I'm currently the lead character artist at Insomniac Games. Just worked on Marvel Spider-Man, but 17 years ago, I started as, I would say, a determined failure. Basically, I dropped out of school because I was sure that I knew more than the teacher. I moved across the country. I didn't know more than the teacher. I applied to multiple jobs. I got rejected multiple times. I eventually landed a contract gig doing pixel art, which maybe shows my age. And from there, that led to a studio job working on mobile games at the time, doing UI, character designs, and environment tiles and stuff like that, and eventually worked my way up as a full-time character artist, and multiple studios later, here I am.
I'm Wyeth Johnson. I'm creeping up on my 20th year in the industry. I've had any number of random art roles along the way, but predominantly technical art and effects related stuff. So if you have questions or portfolios related to those, definitely come talk to me. I've been an art lead and a technical art lead and an art director at Epic Games in one way or another for the last 13 years.
Okay, give these guys a round of applause. So
Our room last year fit like 5 people, so this is very exciting to see.
Yeah, we had a little room problem last year, but obviously the room is twice the size, and that means twice the fun and amazing questions. So I want to just talk to you guys about just some common issues of things you're seeing in portfolios, and I'd like to open up to the panel on that. Claire.
Wow. Put on the spot. I feel like we were talking about this a little yesterday, but I feel like a thing I see, especially in game-centric portfolios, you see it on the front page of ArtStation a lot, is this focus on improving your technical skills without really improving the intent and message and thought behind it. And you will see so many amazing artists there. There are always going to be artists out there who are technically better than all of us. But if you have a portfolio that proves that you have a unique voice, that it proves that you have taste is a thing that we really brought up, that you're consuming things outside of the industry, you're learning how to interpret it in your own unique way, that content is just as important, if not more important, than the technical skills themselves. Because if I hire someone, I can teach them how to use Photoshop better, but it's a lot harder to teach someone just the process of learning what your passions are and what you uniquely bring to a project.
I feel, Wyeth, you were also really passionate about this, especially when we were at lunch.
Well, I just feel like there's so much focus on, man, I really know ZBrush. God, I know it so much. And you're like, okay, great. I mean, that's good. That's useful. You need those skills. But like, if you have good taste and you have an eye and you've developed that and you start to have a little bit of a point of view and you have something to say, I'll teach you any tool in 3 months. Like, if you're talented, you can learn the tool. So I just think this very forward focus on the technical side of it, like, yeah, I'm getting really good at Maya. It's like, I don't really care. I want you to just, show me that you know how to make art, basically.
I think that goes back to the common thing that we usually talk about is like, too much stuff. Like the taste part of it is like editing, right? How much is in your portfolio as well.
Yeah, I would say there's also like a lack of execution too. So again, like focusing on the tools, you'll end up having a portfolio full of like ZBrush models, or you'll have an illustration but not a concept, or you'll have a sphere with a great substance on it, but it's not in a level, it's not actually being used in any context. And like what you need to see and how you'll improve is finishing something, and if it sucks, burn it to the ground, build back up, and just keep doing it until you're good.
What's the importance of presentation?
I think that kind of goes back to what Gavin was just saying. Like, you want to make sure that you're presenting things in context. Like a sphere with a material, great. But like, where does it live? Show me how it exists with 4 more materials in harmony in a shot. Same thing with your models, your concepts. Like, do you do a demo reel for a character? Probably not, unless it's moving. Like the general rule of thumb, in my opinion, is that if it's not moving, it doesn't really get a demo reel. Like I want to see, if I'm looking at environment artists, I want to see breakdown of their assets. I want to be able to actually digest it. I don't want compression to ruin what's happening streaming across the internet. If you want to fly through demo reel to add, great. But like I'd rather see things where I can evaluate the work. Animation, you have to see it move. Effects, you have to see it move. But rule of thumb, that's generally.
Well, I mean, you only get one first impression, right? So when you're showing your portfolio, you want to make sure that the message is, I want to be hired by you and I'm doing this skill, So anything that you do that gets in the way of me hiring you is a bad choice. So too many clicks on a website, demo reels when it shouldn't be, video formats, like, weird design choices like that. Anything that complicates you getting a job is something you shouldn't do.
Over time, I've realized one of the important things about a good portfolio is that it reduces friction. It just reduces the friction between the person reviewing it and the quality of the content getting to their eyeballs, basically. So any kind of choice that you are making which adds complexity or adds clicks or obfuscates some of the decisions you're making behind pages or video downloads and all these other things, that's all increasing the friction between your art and the people that are reviewing it.
Wyeth, just to elaborate on that, would you say the work should speak for yourself? You shouldn't have to explain it?
Yeah, it's interesting, particularly with a first impression. So it's always like you want to start with your strongest thing, and that's a very common thing that you're going to hear over and over the portfolios. What is the absolute strongest thing you have? Which, by the way, you are probably not capable of judging.
Yes.
Like and that's just an honest fact. Is like you're gonna want people, other external people, professors and peers and experts in the field, to be able to help you guide what you think your best thing is, because oftentimes it's just the thing that you're closest to, but not necessarily the strongest. That's a tangent, but just kind of this. When you're making that very, very first impression, you don't want to have to explain yourself. You want it to be very self-evident in that first work why you exist as an artist, so that people are like, oh, yeah, this is character guy, got it. Really into sci-fi, cool, whatever. Let that say something. As you get further in, yeah,
I feel personally attacked.
insane character maniac, and yeah. But then as you get further in, there oftentimes is a little bit of reason for explanation, because we want to know a little bit of the why behind some of the decisions you've made. You just have to keep that stuff light. And if you've collaborated with people, you need to make sure you call that out too, so that we know what you did, because that can be a big problem as well.
That is a huge thing, I feel like, if you are a character concept artist and your work has been taken to a final model, I think it's very important to show that process, because it shows that your work can be successfully translated into 3D, but crediting those artists that you work with, because everything we do is part of this huge pipeline, and everything you're doing is about enabling the next person in that pipeline. So if you forget it, I think people notice.
Well, and just one more comment. Like Greg, one of the things you always say is you look at the portfolio first and then the resume.
Actually, I look at the portfolio, and then the second thing I look at is the portfolio. And then I may look at your name if I go to email you. Like, so, good art is good art. I don't, that's kind of, the work is all that I care about. And I think, we've all been talking about this for years. And, I think the whole group probably feels that way.
Okay. So when we all got together at lunch to have a discussion, these guys could not stop talking about about the tutorials. So I know, Gavin, you should have some really good insights, and also Moby.
Yeah, well, I think it started by how a lot of portfolios will end up having classwork or something from Gumroad that you'll do, and while that serves a purpose in learning the tools, again going back to that, like lacking a soul, I suppose. That's sort of where your portfolio needs to be. So even though like the class assignments, the technical stuff is really important, you need to put your own spin on it. And I'm looking at Moby because, even though Greg explained it, he's a god tier designer. So if somebody like me has like drooled over Team Fortress stuff, and really like he has set the bar for people like you in the audience to have a job doing, really pulling back to illustration and like classic rules for design. I kind of wanted to ask you, how do you do it? How do you be a Moby?
Happy mistakes. No. I mean, really, in art school, I was very, very lucky because I was setting out to become a non-digital artist. I mean, so I was learning oil painting, gouache painting, pastel, run the gamut of everything. So for 5 years, that's what I really, that's what I was really into. Once I saw what they were working on at Valve, that's what really, it was Half-Life 2, and I saw that they could actually create this world. I mean, that's, 15 years ago or so. But it was something that it just blew my mind. I saw that you could actually, instead of like a Pixar movie where it's only, I know I'm going down a tangent here, but it takes years to produce something that you're going to consume for about an hour and a half or so, or 2 hours. This you're going to be playing and enjoying for 60 hours, something like that. But anyways, I personally still love doing a lot of traditional work. Doing drawings. I still do gouache paintings for my character concepts as well, and I'll also do digital as well. But it's good to have a variety.
Do you have any tips or tricks for how would somebody take a classical training like that, or how would somebody take something that's very standardized, everybody can download this sci-fi corridor hallway tutorial from Gumroad, right? Right. How would you advise somebody to take that and make it their own?
Wow, that's a good. It's It's a good question. I mean, the tutorials that I've seen, I mean, they're very, very good. But at the same time, we just have to be, careful because so many. It's a very incestuous, institution, gaming, entertainment in general, right? Like a lot of people that I know, or even portfolios that I see, everybody's looking at, ArtStation, and I love ArtStation as it showcases talent, but at the same time, a lot of people use that as reference gathering. And I would really love to have like a tutorial where people are kind of taught to think outside of the box, right? So instead of, I mean, we're all, fans of sci-fi or fantasy, whatever the case, but imagine coming up with your own way of sourcing, gathering information, gleaning, and being able to tinker with that and bring it forward.
I'd love to speak to that in terms of people digesting art from ArtStation, kind of spitting it out. There, you will see so many portfolios that look like knockoff Simon Stålenhag portfolios, and it's so abundantly clear that it's not his because his is coming from this lived experience. It's referencing his own life, his own childhood, and there's kind of a truth there. And if you're just sort of one step removed from that, it's like taking a JPEG and saving it over and over again. It just turns into this jumbled, hideous Pikachu that you can't recognize anymore. And so I feel like reaching outside of games, looking at traditional illustration and painting, looking at film, just getting out of your house, reading literature, anything you can do to bring that influence back into your work is so refreshing because, my God, you see so many environments that are beautifully painted, but it's the same vignetted, spiky mountains with a tiny person. They have a staff, and there's a city in the distance. And you very rarely see that in the real world. Like, the fact that nature is crazier than most concept art is, like, it's worth looking at those references outside your industry.
And originality isn't too far away. I think that's one thing that people get really stuck on is like, I have to have this insane idea. And I have to do this ridiculous world building, and I have to invent. And like the reality is just make a little choice. Yeah. All you have to do is just choose something, and it doesn't have to be really far from where you are, or even far from real world reference. Just make a little choice, and then that choice will steer you in a new place. Just change the surface or a material type on something into something unexpected, or make something translucent that's not supposed to be. Or just, I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out here, but like just make a little choice. And then within making that little choice, you realize you're injecting a little bit of originality because you don't have the thing, the photograph to compare it to or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you might start to find your voice a little bit that way, where you start making these little choices, and then you realize, oh, I kind of like this. I dig this. This is my jam. So it's just not super far away. You don't have to go way down the rabbit hole to find originality. You can just steer it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say too, like a lot of it's just telling the story, right? Like what story is the piece telling, right? So if you did download this tutorial and you're like working from that, what story do you want to tell, right? And like with Claire, like I've worked from Claire's designs before on BioShock, and the best part of your designs, not to suck up to you or anything like that, but is that like the thought and the research that goes into it, and it's like clearly coming from a place of inspiration versus just like it's a copy paste photo bashed outfit, you know what I mean? And like something like that really speaks to your taste, your style, and what sets you above like other people. So be like Claire.
Claire raised a good, sorry, I just want to say, beautiful point. Looking outside the industry, it's super important. I go to, a lot of these conferences in Europe, for example, do a lot of portfolio reviews, and I'm just shocked at how many times it's the same portfolio. It's just the same portfolios over and over again, so you just gotta really be cognizant. It's only like maybe 1 or 0.01% of people that actually stand out over that entire portfolio review.
I think the one thing too that comes down with this too with the portfolio is not to labor on these, but if you take a tutorial and you do it, great. That doesn't mean you post that in your portfolio. Go do it again, and when you do it again, start looking for ways to make it yours. It also shows that you understand the concept and not what button to click, right? And the tech's going to change yearly, maybe more. But when you understand what the higher level concept was to the button click, it's a much deeper advantage for you as an artist. So.
Okay. So one of the things that Greg and I actually, you and I talk about a lot is comparing your work to other people and to setting the bar that's what's expected in the industry today.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I started, they had rocks and sticks to draw with, but there wasn't a way to compare your work, right? Like, there wasn't ArtStation, there wasn't Polycount, there wasn't a community. I'm like Moby. I started as a traditional artist. So anyway, now you've got all these reference points to compare against, and you're not comparing against the kid in school sitting next to you. You're comparing against the people that are pros. Like, you may not be able to beat Gavin's characters, but Gavin's the guy you're chasing. He's your competition. He's the guy you should be looking to kind of catch. And so, again, it's not just like biggest fish in the smallest pond. When you enter the market, you're actually competing against, seasoned pros. So, like, making sure that you're looking at the right bar. And again, with ArtStation, Polycount, all the communities you have now, it's so much easier to find it.
One thing I like is if people have some questions, I like you to line up at both sections of the stage with the microphone. Now, anyone else have a comment?
Other than just
Greg.
agreeing, but I mean, I think the common misconception when you're in school is that if you're the top of your class, that you're hireable, and really that's not true, because you have to like broaden your horizons and seek feedback from people that aren't your friends or your immediate peers, right? And like that's how you'll be challenged to become better, and that's how you'll get a better understanding of who you're up against.
When I first got to Valve, for example, they called me Slowby because I was really slow. It was bad. And I remember I was sharing an office with this concept artist, and I actually didn't know Photoshop at all. I mean, I didn't know how to use the layers, the Wacom tablet, nothing. And I was struggling. And, I was on edge because I was at Valve, and that's kind of scary. So I went home that night, and I got my sketchbook, which was gray, like a nice gray tone paper, and I started just drawing my concepts there and doing my gouache approach. And I came the next day with this nice, 4 or 5 concepts, and I showed it to my friend that I was sharing the office with. And he's like, "How the hell did you do that?" I was like, and he didn't know what it was, right? He didn't know what type of material it was, and I was like, "No." So we kind of traded. So he kind of taught me things, and I taught him. But it was nice to come in with a completely different approach. You didn't need the tools. And yeah, in like a month, I knew how to use basic Photoshop.
I see there's quite lines already, so we're going to dive into some of the questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Cool.
So, quick question about environmental pieces. When you see a scene, do you also, like I know ArtStation lets you show multiple pictures of like all the assets and what, do you like seeing a couple shots of the scene and then the assets and maybe a sketchy concept if there's one?
Yeah, like I would go like that your beauty piece should be the piece that gets my attention because I don't have, forever, right? So like the harmony, this is the environment, this is the scene, everything working together. And then from there, work macro to micro. So like, beauty shot, isolate assets, possibly show concepts if you want, but kind of breaking it down so that as you get my interest with the pretty shot, and then I'll start looking deeper and deeper and deeper. But if you start the other way, it gets a little.
Yeah, no one wants to see the crappy little sketch.
Show me the awesome, and then once I got the awesome, then I'll look for more. Yeah.
And it really does stand out if you also show, elevations or smaller breakdowns of the space, or if you're showing this larger space and then you start to show smaller angles if you were actually exploring it, or the path through a space. I think it's really important to show you can draw a beautiful environment, but then actually showing how the player is going to experience it or how someone is going to make it. Anything you can do on that front is very gratifying to see.
It also adds some body to your portfolio too. It gives a little it's not just one image. You start to get a little more, and it's still substance, right? So you get more images out of one image, and so it gives a little more depth. So it's good to do.
Yeah. And I'm guessing it just shows like how basically how it ends, and then you see the backwards process all the way to how it began.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost like looking at an architect's interpretation of a house, right? You're not just going to build the house, right?
Yeah.
From that image, you got to kind of go in and show the blueprints and all that stuff, right?
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
You guys talked a lot about making sure that your portfolio stands out from other people's, like, things that have been regurgitated onto ArtStation time after time. But do you have any advice for making sure that something is to your personal taste and style and is unique, but still looks like something that to an art manager and director still makes it clear that you're capable of working within, like, their Space Marine game that they're hiring for?
Do you want to? I mean, it depends on if you even want to do, Space Marines, right? Like if do you want to work at 343? I mean, I probably wouldn't be a good fit there because I have a different taste. I admire what they do, but I gear up my portfolio for specific companies or the games in general. I don't want to work on a game that I don't, if it's in a genre that I don't like, I'm not even going to do it either. So.
I think it's, one, make sure you're applying places that you want to work or that you can find a hook in that work that still makes it interesting to you. So if you can, there's so many boring Space Marines out there, but say you do a take on Space Marines that's referencing like 60s NASA technology or that's using animal imagery and patterning or historical fashion tailoring. There are ways that you can bring interesting shape language and details to something that's otherwise kind of boring. When I interviewed at Microsoft, they're like, what properties wouldn't you want to work on? I was like, Halo, it's so dumb, it's for boys. and I was such a little firebrand, and it was kind of irresponsible of me to not just say like, I don't think I'd be interested in Halo, but I bet I could find a way to bring my expertise and my personal voice to this. You should hire me.
Hi, so I'm from Academy of Art and I'm working on my portfolio this semester. So my question would be, is there any advice for level designers to showcase their works in portfolio, like what people are looking for from level designers' portfolio?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For level design?
Yep.
It's really like how you're going to interpret. So do you work with a collaboration of artists for environment design, like so that they can help build up, the level for you and, help supply assets and whatnot? The way that we work, or I've worked in the past with level design, there's kind of like an in-between. There's an environment crew that helps port over the representation, right, of tangible assets, right, over the abstract of the gameplay space. So that's a good question.
Yeah, it depends if you're world building or level designing. Like world building is, like you're laying out. Probably involve a little bit of lighting and stuff. Level design, I think it's good to maybe have like a little bit of a playable, so I can move around the space. So again, that would be a presentation. I think it's a little different, but it's catered to the thing you're trying to make.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the talk. So I'm currently working at an animation studio that is predominantly working on a Disney series. And I would like to kind of shift into realistic-looking environment art for AAA. And I'm trying to figure out how to kind of shift my portfolio from being this very stylized kind of looking thing to more environmental art without completely disregarding my experience with like pipeline and working with others and that kind of thing. Do you have any tips on that?
Those transitions are hard because oftentimes they do have to feel a little bit like an afterthought in the portfolio. Otherwise, the message is going to feel very awkward and mixed. And we are going to be reviewing it, and we're kind of go like, what is this? Would be the kind of broad scale question you start to ask yourself of like, what does this person really want to do?
Right.
The reality is, you're going to have to basically set all that stuff aside and work as if none of it exists. And then really, really drive home the quality of a, high-end, realistically rendered, if that's your thing now,
Yeah.
our portfolio for environments that includes that squint test overall feeling being right and the lighting being right and the tonal range being right, and then if you're going for realism, then the albedo and the textures have to be right and everything. So you have to nail all that stuff and assume that your other experience doesn't exist. And then once you have that stuff and it's there for you, you start to work some of your other experiences back into your portfolio strategically, or even just in your resume as a complement to the portfolio to say, hey, there is more to me.
Right.
I have more to offer, but this is the thing I care about, and this is what you should be judging me on. And then oftentimes we might get into a situation where you're being compared to somebody who's roughly equal, and then you might win because you have this little extra touch. You have this pipeline experience. You can script in Python. Mel. I don't know what
Yeah.
but like there's another little cherry on top of the sundae, and that can help push you over the edge. But I don't think you should really assume that any of that exists
Okay.
while you're trying to put together a portfolio for a different kind of path.
Right. Okay.
Just to add to that, like usually when because we're in Los Angeles, so there's plenty of film people around us. So usually a turnoff of hiring a applicant that's from film into games is that there's usually like a knowledge gap that I think you're trying to fill by like doing these new pieces for games, right? So beyond the like technical understanding of like what's a PBR material and like real-time rendering and building an efficient space and stuff like that, it's more the purpose of it is a bit different, because rather than just telling the story, it's like an interactive space, it's playable, like does it like flow well and things like that. So you got to kind of change your mindset a little bit and show that through the portfolio.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
Hello. I was wondering what was the best way to represent a full game project in your resume and portfolio?
So kind of like an IP, right? Development. like the
Yeah, whether
broad
it's
spectrum.
made independently or with a small team. So.
That's a good question.
I mean, if you've got a whole game that's done, okay, so if there's a way to make, I'd treat it just like we do when we make a game, like record B-roll, splice it together, cut out the boring stuff, like not having the mouse slide around, but like like treat it, but like clip it together like B-roll, like a trailer. Same way I go about selling my game when I'm done with it. I do a ton of that. I spend an awful lot of time toward the end of the project actually recording B-roll, evaluating. That's how I evaluate the game. But yeah, so and I put all that stuff together and I try to make it juicy and speedy. And again, presentation. Think about that. So that's just like record, go through and actually give it some video editing to actually make it interesting and exciting. And that's how I would probably show a full game, the same way we would do when we ship it.
And just be careful to make sure you represent only your work. That's really common, is to, wow, we did this thing and there were a bunch of us and look at what we all did. And then we're like, what did this person actually do? What did you do is a really important question to ask. Probably the most important question to answer when it comes to portfolio is, here's the things that I can do, and make that hyper clear. Because there's nothing worse than, wow, this looks really good. This junior person, a lot of potential. This looks really interesting. Let's get him on the phone. And then you get her on the phone or something, and she's like, well, I modeled the engines on the spaceship. And you're like, no, I thought we were headed in a different place. And so it's really, you have to be very careful to like represent yourself very, very carefully and appropriately for just the things that you made, and make that really clear.
Thank you.
Hi, sorry. I'm Allie. Thanks for being here. So I'm wondering if you think it's beneficial to sort of gear your portfolio towards a certain role or a particular position that you're looking for. And then also I'm curious if you have any tips for like a tech art portfolio and what you would expect to see on that.
I can answer the tech art one. Well, actually, I mean, I could probably dabble a little bit in both, in the sense that you always want to be tailoring your portfolio to who you're applying for. That's kind of portfolio 101, and you have to be making those choices which are showing how you are relevant to the place and how interested you are in that place, and make that really clear. You know, blanket single resume to 10 different companies is not a good idea, and by resume I mean resume and a corresponding portfolio. As far as tech art, so first of all, there are a lot of different definitions of technical art. Some people consider tech art to be tech animation, and that's a whole other ball of wax and has its own host of problems. So I'll just talk about, you know, how we at Epic anyway view technical art, which is basically like shaders, technical understanding of the rendering pipeline, and basically how the, you know, artwork fits into that. Budgets would be another big one. Visual effects can be part of that. You know, there's technical VFX artists basically who are actually writing HLSL and stuff to do things. So I think the thing people forget when they make tech art portfolios is that they have to be technical and an artist. And the artist one tends to kind of slough off the side over time. And what you're left behind is this shell of, you know, node-based scripting screenshots and HLSL snippets, and you're like, does this person have a soul? I can't tell.
You're interviewing a robot.
Yes, yeah, totally. That has basically almost happened, yeah. And so I feel like you really have to be careful to show that you are aesthetically have something to say. And so even if that means you're just taking something that's really beautiful, like a still image, and bringing it to life using all of these techniques like complex shaders or effects or, you know, I don't know, those kind of problems, make sure that the end result is pretty, is beautiful, because those are the best technical artists, are people who can, you have this really lovely vision, you can't quite pull it off, so they pull the rabbit out of the hat and find a way. Like, that's really the person you're trying to hire when you're trying to hire tech artists, is that person. So don't abandon the visual side in favor of just showing that you know how to, you know, string some HLSL together or whatever.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. My name is Michal. I'm really glad you guys are here and that you're doing this. I have 2 questions, if that's all right. First one, is there anything that, like, if you see it in a portfolio, makes you immediately move on to the next one? Like, regardless of what field or what it's targeting? Like, something that's just an absolute no-no.
That's a good question.
I mean, when I'm doing a portfolio review, first and foremost, I flip through it, and people start panicking. Because they're like, but you're supposed to start with this one. But for me personally, I mean, I go through it. I want to make sure that we gloss over. I mean, especially like today, for example. How many minutes do we have per person?
10.
Right. So in 10 minutes, right? We've got to, you know, there's a lot of stuff to go over, right? Now, are you talking about the context of a piece that's offensive, perhaps, or just not hitting the bar?
Either not hitting the bar or something that doesn't mesh with your company's standards.
I mean, yeah, I mean that happens all the time, but it's okay. You know, it's okay. You know, you know, you're going to course correct. I remember I went to Pixar. They invited me. I had my portfolio, and they went through it, and it was all geared for illustration. And they're like, and a totally different kind of style as well. And they were like, you know, you've got your chops, but you know, come back in 6 months with a new portfolio, and we'll consider looking at it again. You know, it's okay.
So I won't hire somebody that doesn't have any real-time work. So if you're an amazing sculptor or amazing, like, you know, high-res asset creator, I need to see it in real time. Because like really what I'm hiring is a problem solver, right? Like more than just an artist. Like I want to hire somebody that'll join the team and help us create the next big thing, right? So if you don't show that potential in your portfolio, like you won't take that one step just to meet me halfway, then I pass immediately.
I'll piggyback off of Moby's comment that I think it is abundantly clear when I see a portfolio and do that initial quick flip. If someone just has an illustration portfolio and they're applying for a concept art job, it's just a hard no immediately. Even if they are so talented, illustration it's a Venn diagram that overlaps with concept art. There's a lot of the same technical skills, but there are certain stylistic things and compositional things that are important in illustration that don't speak to the thought process and the actual concept side of concept art. So really being able to make that distinction is important. And also the one hard line is, good God, if you have anything traced or stolen, we will know.
Oh, yeah.
Do not do that. That's such a red flag.
I've had somebody apply to I'm a hiring manager. I've had somebody apply to one of my openings with my work in their portfolio. Do not steal my work.
When I was at Microsoft, we were working with this studio making a game that I will not say the name of, but involved Western animals. So figure it out on your own. And the first concept art they sent over to me, and I was like, this looks familiar. I pulled the Rango concept art book off of my shelf, and they just traced Rango art and sent it over to Microsoft. And then, of course, they did the thing where they blamed it on an intern. Mm-hmm. Oh, this poor intern did this. Mm-hmm. And we're all so well versed in our industry and in other industries that it's so immediately apparent if you are either very closely aping someone's style to the point of plagiarism, or if you're just straight tracing something. So don't do it. You're all good people.
And that is a lesson in how small the industry is, right?
Oh, yeah.
So something like that is a black mark on your reputation for sure.
I think also incomplete work, that kind of stops me.
Oh yeah.
If it's all gray box, if it's not intentional, it shouldn't be there. So if you didn't finish it, and it happens to be the thing that's on the front page, and it's a gray sculpt that's not done, and it's okay, this is not there. So that would probably stop me.
By the way, somehow we have gone this long without telling everybody to delete half the stuff in their portfolio right now, please.
What's your fashion quote that you usually say?
You mean as far as
remove
the
a piece
number?
of jewelry or whatever?
Which
before
I
you go
did
out?
look up, by the way.
Was that
It is
you?
remove a piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
No, one of you said the Coco Chanel quote.
Actually, it was Darren
yeah.
who said it.
Yeah. I've never quoted Coco Chanel in my life.
Someone last year.
Well, I usually say delete your portfolio in half and then subtract one, and that's how many pieces you're actually supposed to have in the current portfolio as it exists. It's so common that you hide it all at the back. That's always what happens is you got a couple of strong things, and then the portfolio just kind of dwindles off toward the end, and then you're stuck with a bunch of stuff that shouldn't really be in there in the first place. It's so much better to show a couple of really high value things than it is to show us even one that's not high value, because now we start to question your taste. Do they know it's not good? Are they aware? Are they a little ashamed of it? Is that why it's in the back? Is there some situation? What's going on here? I'd rather see three amazing things. And I tell this story every year, but we hired an environment artist who had 3 pieces in his portfolio. He had 3 pictures. And he's a junior guy, amazing 3 images, and we hired him. So it doesn't take much. You just have to have really good taste in those 3 images, and we're going to notice.
Do I have time to ask my other question?
Why not?
I'm curious.
Sorry.
We've got the room a little longer.
I'm just curious. Is there anything you'd look for specifically in an animation demo reel for games? I know that you've been talking a lot about the artistic side and rendering in real time, and I was wondering what an animator would want to present to specifically a game company.
In-engine work is extremely important. And when you get an animation portfolio, even from guys who've been in the industry for 30 years, and their entire portfolio is just cinematic work, that's really hard to judge because game animation is such a specific beast compared to cinematic. So I think you can absolutely have some acting work in your reel because that's relevant to do games with cutscenes and things like that, but really showing that you know how to animate a character, how to do run cycles, how to actually move them through a space, and that you're aware of how characters look and animate from the angle that they're intended to be in a game. So how you're animating a character for Assassin's Creed is going to be different from how you're animating a character in Dota 2 or something.
If you've seen a first-person animation, if you go and watch the talks on Overwatch for how they're doing, what they're doing, the hoops they jump through to make it look right, makes the animations absolutely absurd. Like just bonkers choices with arms that are 33 feet long and stretched out into the perspective of the camera. So that's a really good exercise too if you're talking about game animation, is really, like you said, pick something that's in context of actually how games are made and then animate to that standard. And then if somebody's reviewing the portfolio sees that, they're going to see that, oh, you're thinking a little bit further than just the moving from pose to pose or whatever it is that you're doing from day to day on the animation side, that you're actually starting to make some relevant choices to making the product. That is always going to win out a little bit over, I can just make a pretty run cycle or whatever.
That's one thing that always has bothered me about animation portfolios is that an animator doesn't consider where the camera is.
Yeah.
Like, you like, for God's sake, put it in perspective, right? Like, do something, like, give it, it goes back to that presentation, like that little bit of consideration, your camera, if your work is just as good as the third animator that applied for the job that day, but you considered your cameras, that little bit is going to make you look better than that person that was just as good as you.
Yeah.
Right? And that's that edge that you need. So it's that presentation and thinking about that and how you show your work, just giving it that little extra thought is huge.
Just one other thing. This is not a plug for my friend, but one of my co-workers, Rory Alderson, he does a lot of things on YouTube, and just like what you guys are all talking about, the context, but he's actually going, repairing old assets and giving them, new flourish and a new fresh perspective. So he's a person that you might want to look at in that context.
I will say that thinking about the camera is also relevant for, any other job in the industry, especially from a character design standpoint. A lot of times you'll see these beautiful character designs in a void, but if they are meant to be seen from like a top-down orthographic view, you need to completely rethink that color blocking and how they read from that angle. There's a reason why a lot of Assassin's Creed characters have cool backs and interesting cloaks, because it makes it interesting for the 90% of the time that you are running away from the camera. It's really keeping that in mind in a way that character design in film is very different from character design in games, and knowing that difference really shows if you show that in your concepts.
All right, thank you so much.
Hello. Earlier you mentioned that it's not so much the resume, it's more the portfolio that you guys look at and the work. However, what if I'm applying to be a concept artist? My portfolio says concept artist. My LinkedIn says I'm in hospitality and accounting. Do I just clear out all that work history, even though I have zero professional experience?
Fine.
At the end of the day, if the work's good, the work's good, I've hired people from a Walmart before, just because you're working in hospitality doesn't mean that you're not badass,
Mm-hmm.
So, it's relevant. You're still working with people. You're probably dealing with customers and stuff like that. But really, I always look at the work first.
The bottom line is I'm not going to look at your LinkedIn until I've already looked at your portfolio 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
And so if I like your work enough to do that, I don't really care. Mm-hmm. It's when I go to your LinkedIn, I'm looking to see did you jump jobs every 3 months? Mm-hmm. Or did you sustain something? Did you work in hospitality for 3 years? I'm more concerned about that than I am that you worked in hospitality. So, but again, I'm not getting there if the work isn't there. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I was just curious, so what technical requirements do concept artists need to show in their portfolio, stuff like thumbnailing and rendering, in order to show we're ready for the iterative production path that is concept art?
The tech. Well, why don't you guys go ahead?
I will say it is a mixed bag what people want to see in portfolios. I've definitely heard people say that they don't want to see any process in portfolios whatsoever. I love seeing process within reason. I love seeing thumbnailing, color blocking, and because if you show that process and I can see it got stronger each time and you were making smart decisions, don't put in process if your sketches are better than your final, because it's a bad look. I don't necessarily think, I am not a subscriber to the idea that more is better. Sometimes concepts need 100 iterations, sometimes they need 2 or 3. So just showing that natural process, not feeling like, oh, I have to draw a whole page of silhouettes. It's like, because sometimes the work that you're putting in is on the research side of things, is in your head. And if you put down 3 silhouettes, and then you narrow it down, start refining that, seeing that process, seeing that you were thinking through that is super valuable to me.
I mean, I think that's like a misconception as a concept artist, is that all day, every day, you're making this great, polished piece of art, you know, when really the majority of the time, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a concept artist, but yeah, you're basically making ugly sketches with an art director to like get a problem solved, right? And showing like your work is showing that you can solve those problems and work with like an art director to, you know, get a problem solved.
Well, I think Claire touched on this earlier about concept and illustration. Like the illustration can frequently masquerade as concept. Concept solves problems. It's great that you make a really polished render, but like, how did you do it? Like, show me you can think, right? It's a really hard job, and it's a totally different muscle. So understanding that difference, that doesn't mean illustration doesn't have a place in the process, but understanding that that's what we're hiring is important.
Yeah, critical thinking. Go ahead.
No, go.
Oh, no, but just as far as it shows us critical thinking and, you know, the amount of silhouette studies that we do, I mean, there are hundreds before we even start filling in the interior shapes. And then, you know, just going forward from there, you know, until we end up even at color. We don't, I'll actually, when I'm building a game, there's no color for at least 4 or 5 months. In the world itself. There'll be material renderings, the characters will be running around making idiots out of themselves, but at the end of the day, everything is done with read hierarchy in mind. But yeah, back to the point, yeah, showing that process all the way through. And then, I mean, the color is kind of the icing on the cake, that final polished piece, right? That's kind of the fun part. So, yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. What advice do you have for someone who wants to make their demo reel pop? Because you mentioned earlier that environments are a bit hard to get right with the demo reel.
I mean, again, I would go with telling a story, right? So if you are doing a demo reel, I would have that as like a last resort. I mean, Greg knows more than I do about that, but really like stills of your image that really tell a story about the setting, the world that pulls people in will always put you above somebody that knows Substance Painter and they can make like a nice corridor or something like that, right? So yeah, really make it like a narrative experience, have it be, you know, a story, right? And that'll make it better. If it's for your demo reel, I mean, I would cater any camera work to that. And I mean, Greg's the master of that, but I would really, if you're going to do that, make sure you pay attention to the cameras. Don't just do this like straight, you know, pan down a hallway. Like you have to like make it worth why I'm watching a video, you know?
That comes down to the comment earlier of make a choice. Just kind of choose something that is a little bit past just the setting of the place itself. And one really thing that can be really valuable for an environment, if you're stuck, if you don't know what to do, just ask yourself, what happened there 100 years ago? What happened there 10 years ago? What happened there last year? And then what happened there 5 minutes ago? And if you could answer those questions in that image, then the viewer is going to feel like those questions are answered too, and then you start to feel like the place is alive a little bit. And that's a really nice way. If you're stuck, if you don't know what to choose, just go through a little thought exercise like that, and then ask yourself, like, well, this hallway, did somebody just walk down here with dragging an axe on the floor? Why is there a gouge mark? Like, just little things, make little choices, and then those will come through in the final image.
Sorry, I'm not cutting off anyone, am I? Do you think it would be better to just omit a reel if you don't think it adds anything to your portfolio?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Simple answer, yes.
Cool.
Reels
Thanks.
are for animation.
Yeah.
Generally.
I actually, if you want to look it up, I have an article called Why I Hate Demo Reels. It's about a 3-page rant, so.
A treatise you nailed to the door of GDC.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's probably plastered on some lamppost outside.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
First off, I also went to the Art Institute, so it means a lot seeing you up there. But I was wondering how you guys consolidate clicks with content. Because say if I have an environment and I have all these breakdowns, if like there's 3 environments and all the breakdowns are on my landing page, obviously it's not going to load and it's going to be cluttered. So how do you make that consolidation between organization and being too much to to click through?
Right, the flow chart, right? That's a good. I like that. I mean, for me, like with my website, it's pretty straightforward. Like I just put everything, but they're all categorized into what I've worked on in the past. But yeah, just creating a flow chart that's gonna, make sense to people, and just making it very simple and not an elaborate kind of experience.
Yeah, I guess if the beauty shot is the gallery, you get 10 of those, and when you click on it, then the deeper stuff is there, so you don't overwhelm the person with like choices and stuff. You don't want to get bombarded. So if you've got enough work to have like 4 or 5 environments, let's say, and then you click on it, and when you click on it, it drops you down into like the deeper stuff. That's, you've got me now. Like it's just, you want to get them to click on it.
Yeah.
So once you've clicked on it, then I'm going to keep scrolling. So that's kind of the way to go at it, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you guys so much for coming. My question is, as a modeler, you're in the middle of the pipeline and you want to show that you can make decisions like you guys were saying, but you also want to show that like, hey, I can take a concept that someone else made and interpret that. So how do you balance that? Like, I can make my own decisions, and also if someone gives me a concept, like I can execute that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, so I guess as like a lead or an art director, like usually what I'll try to do is have, a good concept artist, such as Claire, will give you a lot of reference to pull from, right? And that'll start inspiring you to make decisions based off of those concepts, right? So when we're working on like Liz or like Lutece twins and stuff like that, like we're pulling from the same reference, but we're also like innovating based on like what the concept has, right? So like it's really the guideline, and like once we start getting it in game, how can we put our own twist onto this so that it, it like renders well. It's like, it's unique in the world and stuff like that. So I think the first, to get your foot in, or I guess like the first, things you can do is start finding opportunities maybe of obscurity where you can innovate, right? So if there's a concept that's like more rough, it's like what can you do to interpret that in a way that fits the world, like fits the project pillars and like moves things forward. And then from there you'll start getting more and more, pieces of the pie.
Interpretation is a great word there, because that's another way to take it as well, which is, hey, somebody gave me this amazing concept of a sci-fi crate, I don't know, and I'm going to reproduce that thing to death. I'm going to kill it. That thing is going to look exactly the way it was art directed, and yes, nailed it. But then if you could go and make some variants, and then they're all there together in the scene, and you show this on the pedestal, I did the thing, and then around it you're saying, oh, and I understood why the thing existed, and so I was able to intuit the shape language and the forms and the ideas and the details, and then go and invent something similar or tangential to it and show those two and call that out. I think that would be really appealing, particularly for somebody junior where you wouldn't always expect them to kind of take that leap. I think that would be a leap ahead territory for us looking at the portfolio. That would show some good strength, right?
Cool. Thank you.
Great.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My name's Gerald. I'm graduating this spring from a game program, if you will. My concern is that the program has more of like a broad range of skills that it's been teaching, so not just like game or game design, but also like app development and virtual reality and website design and like coding and just like a broad range of things, right? So for the artifacts that I have for my portfolio, it kind of reflects all of that instead of like one narrow focus. So what are your thoughts on like having more of a general portfolio as I've described to like being more narrowly focused? Thanks.
So I mean, I think like most schools, they're really giving you like a primer onto like, here's an appetizer for all the different things that you could do with your career, right? But I think the better choice would be to find what you're most passionate about and just go all in on that, right? Like having a general portfolio, we do hire generalists, like there's smaller studios, indie studios, it's way more common. But when you're spread so far, like I've never hired a website designer and a scripter and a modeler and like all in one person, you know what I mean? So I think the more you focus, the better you'll get, the quicker you'll get better, and it's generally just a better move.
Okay.
Yeah, the key is when you're going to become a generalist later on down the line. Like you're going to, when I started, at Valve, for example, yeah, it was just working on character development, but initially, foundational skills and learning how to draw in general, right? Like getting at least good enough at those foundational places. Color theory, like that was a big one too, and then using that for those 5 years and really getting a firm foundation there. And then I could go in and learn level design and learn just all the taste, ZBrush, general modeling as well. So, but yeah, generalist, I mean, that's something, at least for me, happens a little bit further on down the line.
So then real quick, just to cap on that, if I wanted to go more towards the direction of game design or narrative design, I probably shouldn't want to include like the 3D models that I've been doing in my.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the difference with like Moby too is that he became like legendary at like one thing, and then like started learning other skills from there. But right now, and it's not meant to, I'm not being an asshole or anything, but like a lot of students will end up being not good at a lot of things, right? And like what you need to do is be really good at one thing to be hireable, and from there you can branch out and learn other things. Like I like the reason why I'm such good friends with Wyeth is that I'm bugging him about like scripting stuff in Unreal, right? So, while I'm doing character model, I'm like, hey, how do you do something in Blueprints? You know what I mean? So eventually you'll learn those things, but the main objective is getting hired. So form a hireable skill.
Super junior generalists basically don't exist.
Yeah.
They just don't.
One of my good friends, he started at Riot. He went to Art Center. He's been working at Riot for about, I think, 7 or 8 years now. And within the last year, he's learning Unreal. And he's actually building his own game on the side, right? And that takes a lot of dexterity and knowledge. But he had that foundation.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your frankness and thanks for being here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hi. You guys talked at the beginning about the importance of having your own voice and the importance of having like research outside of the art world when you're doing your work, and I found that to be very, very true in the work I've done. Like a lot of my best stuff has come from like historical research or like other things that aren't from ArtStation. But at the same time, portfolios are supposed to be kind of carefully trimmed to be just right. So do you guys like seeing evidence of that research in the like our portfolio posts themselves, or do you like to be like self-evident from our beauty shots and things like that?
Interesting. I feel like generally I would want to see the evidence of that research in your work in the same way that instead of including life drawing in your portfolio, it should be evident in your character work. I wouldn't kick it out of bed for eating crackers if I saw like a couple reference images within a larger sheet of thumbnails just to sort of understand where your head's at. I don't necessarily think you need to do a deep dive into your research process. You can kind of include in the notes that you were looking at a certain culture or a certain time period or certain type of rock formation.
Yeah, and we understand, like, if you're coming out of school, like, that's not plagiarism, right? You're just taking your reference shots and you're gleaning, and then you're going to tinker from there and make it your own, right? We all do it.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much.
For sure.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm more into the programming and game design sort of side of the game dev stuff, and like I've built like a ton of prototypes, just sort of figuring out little mechanics here and there. And I was wondering, like I've been seeing that it's kind of hard to show it off in a portfolio, just because they're like little snippets, and people might not really understand what they would be exactly just by themselves. So I was wondering if you have any tips for like building a portfolio for just like little prototypes for games and stuff like that.
Would that be dealing with level design or just the game itself?
Just sort of the game itself. Like I have just building out like a really short prototype for like an idea I might have in Unity, like, oh, this sort of mechanic could work. So I want to try see if I could do that. And then just like getting a large amount of those over time instead of like building out entire full games from them.
So I think we're going to be all more kind of art-centric, but I will tell you some things that I have seen that have worked in the past that aren't just playable. The most important way to judge game design is to interact with it, right? So that's going to be your primary use case for selling somebody that you are talented. But I have seen something interesting, which is kind of a long form conversation about your thought process as a deep dive on an aspect of what you're designing. So for instance, I've seen people go on and say like, hey, look what happens when I jump. Okay, look what happens when I jump and hold. Look what happens when I add a little bit of a camera shake bump to that jump. Look what happens like when I hit the ground and then I dip the camera a little bit and then I have an easing function that pulls it right back at the right speed so that I feel like I should be able to jump again right at the right moment. So they're like all these really subtle things go into that problem, and seeing somebody take it all the way down the rabbit hole in this kind of long form blog style, like here's what I did and here's my thought process, is like one of the only ways I think for people to get inside of a designer's head. So I don't think any of us are capable of telling you exactly here's how you make a good design portfolio, really, but I have seen that work, or at least whet the appetite of designers looking at other designers' work. So for what it's worth.
Would like something like making tutorials just sort of show off that I know what I'm doing? That'd be like a good way to get.
I think that's an interesting way to do it too. Yeah, I mean, you don't really know something until you can teach it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So if you can prove that you can teach it to somebody else, that's probably a pretty good thing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hi there. So in times in your portfolio when you want to include that you've been a team lead and you are handling other people's assets and things like that, how would you show that off in the portfolio in kind of an interesting way rather than like a line of text?
That's an interesting one.
It's a chin scratcher.
Yeah.
So is your work mixed in?
Yeah, I'm a student right now, so I have many experiences, one of them being kind of the producer or a team lead in when we were creating the game.
And you're creating assets as well?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I would.
And
I
I was
mean,
also like taking other people's assets and putting them together for
I mean, that
one
could-
polished.
that could be text. Again, you could start with a beauty shot, and then what I would do is probably isolate your assets in the shot, and then knock back the rest of it, and then in the text, just a little text blurb. I mean, I guess that's probably how I would just do it off the top of my head. Point out these are mine, the ones that, and then you could just, do just a breakdown of those pieces by themselves.
And just remembering that that data point, that thing that you did, is just icing. Again, that's not really that meaningful to like somebody judging your work. Your work still has to be the thing that speaks for itself. A tiny little data point that says, "Oh, and I helped everybody else too," might be that little kicker that makes you a tiny touch more interesting, maybe than the next person that didn't do that. All other things being equal, but I wouldn't overvalue that. Right, in exchange for other things. Like, would make sure that the art is still the forefront of the thing that you're trying to get across.
Right, thank you. Hi.
Hello, guys. Thanks for the presentation. It was awesome. I'm a character artist, and before I once showed someone my work, and they said that if you're interested in being a character artist, just show the character. But sometimes when I finish the character, I'm excited, I pose it out, I put them in an environment and get a nice still, just to kind of show a little bit more soul, like you guys were saying, stand out from the crowd so you don't get your typical A pose, T pose. Could you guys elaborate on what you guys would rather see?
I don't love seeing T-pose characters. Like I find it much more interesting to understand. I mean, we talked about context a lot today. This idea of this is this character as they fit into an environment. Obviously, don't put them in a random environment that feels like a disconnect. But if you can pose them in interesting ways, if you can show them interacting with other characters, if you can prove out that this is a model that moves well and rigs well, and can exist in an environment. I personally think that's a boon, especially with concept art as well. When I just see a character just standing there, it's like, well, that's useless. Show me them emoting, show me them moving, show me how they work within an environment and not just on their own.
Yeah, I think it comes down to presentation, right? So if you're putting a character in an environment and the environment's distracting from the quality of the character, then it's a bad idea, right? If you're not good at rigging or posing and it's distracting from the quality of the character, it's bad. But there is a happy medium where you can go from the A pose to something that's more relaxed that fits the character and looks more natural. And that still shows that you went the extra mile to care about how people view your work as an experience, And I think that's what matters more than like, it's in an environment, I mean? Like, I'm worrying about that, and especially too if you're trying to if you're trying to get in and you're spending time building out an environment when things on your character could be better, then you need to invest the time in the character, not in the other parts, you know?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello, guys. Thanks for the talk. I am a 3D environment artist, but I'm also thinking of switching lanes into narrative design. Although my issue is I only have 3D environment art in my portfolio and nothing related to narrative design. So I was wondering what exactly you would put in a narrative design portfolio and how exactly would you outline or format that? Like, does it have to be images or does it have to be Word documents?
I mean, a lot of people use like, what's that old game that's like 20 years old now that people are still making, Neverwinter Nights or whatever?
I think Moby said it was Half-Life 2, and maybe had an existential crisis up here.
But like, well, they're actually basically scripting narrative experiences directly in these games, and you know those games expose an SDK that allows you to do that. The reality is you're kind of screwed. You don't have anything right now.
Right.
Then don't trick yourself into thinking you have anything, because you don't. Like if you want to be a narrative designer and you are not reflecting that work, then you got to start over, basically. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you think you can torque and twist this environment work that you've done in the past to serve that purpose. You're going to put yourself immediately in a very awkward middle place where nobody's happy. The people who are reviewing the portfolio aren't happy, and then you're not happy because you feel like you're not even representing your own work that is the thing you want them to hire you for. I think you're just going to have to put in the time, honestly. And that probably involves something playable where you can actually show and interact with these narratives that you're interested and passionate about, these stories you're trying to tell. You're going to have to kind of do that in situ, so to speak, so that people can interact with it.
And you can even improve a lot with like using ink or something where you're just writing these interactive, just totally text narratives. Like the entire beginning of Firewatch is just this really emotional thing that made me cry when I first played through it. And all it is you're just making simple decisions and being walked through this story and interacting with a story. And so what I think you need to do, is just you need to write. You need to write in ways that are interactive. If you can find small jams that are happening where you can add your work to these small projects and really prove out how to design a narrative. It's that same thing where you can't just slowly transition that portfolio. Right. That's just going to be a separate portfolio that you slowly fill out until you feel like you have a body of work to show to people.
Okay, because currently there is a story idea that I'm working on, but I'm guessing since at this point should I just focus more on the environments of that and then put that into the portfolio, or just like drop that whole whole idea?
I mean, it's really a question about like what you want, you know? If like you really want to be a narrative designer, then rebuild.
Yeah, just gotta work at it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm a game and level design student, and most of my portfolio work contains a complete level that I made from a school project. For a level design portfolio, should there be things like bubble diagrams and 2D layouts, maybe videos of prototypes, and of course, either a playable version of the level and the video? That goes without saying, I think, but the bubble diagrams and map layouts and all those, should I add those as well, or just show the finished product?
I would definitely show your process, and I mean, yeah, just what you're saying right there sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, especially for level design. Cool. You guys have anything to say?
Yeah, show your work. I think that's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it shows that you didn't just accidentally fall into good level design. If you're showing that entire diagrammatic process and showing the thought behind it, it's really valuable.
So guys, we're gonna wrap it up right now and start lining up for the portfolio reviews. But to the two people that are still left on the sides, if you guys could just come up forward to us and talk to us directly.
Okay,
cool.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.